Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for staying until the very end. We're the last group, so we appreciate your patience. So I'm Rene Rosas. I'm a second-year public policy student, and I'll be presenting on our project that was based in Bucaramanga, Colombia, in the Santander department, and along with my colleagues who were part of our field studies and part of our team for the last year. So the project title is called Climate Action Planning and Vulnerable Human Settlement Protection. And our partner organizations was the UN Habitat and UN Andean Countries Hub, the Mayor's Office of Bucaramanga, Colombia, the Colombian Ministries of Environment and Housing, City and Territory, and the UN Climate Change. And our focus of our project was two-tier, was legislative and humanitarian. So our fellows team, we actually had a really large team of very interdisciplinary team members. Areli Valderrama, who was a MP, Public Health and Urban Planning student. Lucas Hagen, who is with me right now, who's a Ford student colleague. Claire Knudsen, who is a Ford School alumni. Sarai Celada, who is an urban planning student, was a urban planning alumni student. Jose Ortega, who's a law student and a urban, just a law student. Law student. Alison Hirsch, who is a dual degree law student and urban planning. Brigitte Smith, who's an urban planning alumni, and Marco Dominguez, who's an urban planning student. And our advisor, Dr. Ana Paula Pimentel Walker, who is an associate professor at the Tubman College of Architecture and Planning. So our goal essentially was to understand and assess how Bucaramanga incorporates national and regional climate change policies and planning instruments into its municipal legal framework. And our team focused on adaptive and mitigative measures to climate change in informal and precarious settlements. So our scope of work was within Bucaramanga, which is one of the largest municipalities in the Santander department, and it's surrounded. The surrounding cities are much smaller: Florida Blanca and Giron. And we partnered. Bucaramanga is also a very unique city as it prioritizes green spaces. It's known as the city of parks, Ciudad de Parques. And within our work, we partner with the Department of Solid Waste Management, the Planning Secretary, the Metrolinea, and Environmental Authority. And our activities and methods that we delved in was two-tier. So the first semester, we worked on a literature review of Bucaramanga, so regarding their mitigative, adapted, and climate change data points and policies, and a legal analysis of municipal policies and legislation. So we actually centered our municipal research on the United Nations Climate Change Toolkit, which is a national framework, but we adapted to the municipal. So we used their framework and try to assess the municipal policies through that the larger national tool. And for our second part, we did field work within Colombia. So we did tours of the citywide climate infrastructure and interviews. So we spoke with municipal stakeholders and community stakeholders. Field visits to informal settlements. We visited two informal settlements that are in different parts of the legalization framework. So both of them are in the process, but at different stages. Climate change workshops in one of the informal settlements, Luz de Salvacion, too. And within that, we did a transit walk, a participatory mapping, and oral history and community chronology, which Lucas will be going further deeper into it. And so some of the photos from the field, as we can see on the right, it's a picture of El Carrasco Park, which is one of our which was one of the municipal policies that covered mitigation, and it's like one of the more innovative parks on sustainability. It has a lot of social services that cater to its residents.
Thanks. So my name is Lucas Hagen. I'm a second-year MPP as well. The Transect Walk is a tool developed by the World Bank to help communities assess their physical environment. We walked a predetermined route with the members of this informal settlement that was in the process of legalization to assess certain utilities, civil infrastructure, amenities, including houses and the size of houses, the type of houses, businesses, churches, schools, etc., some of which are mentioned here. This allowed us to assess their access to civic services, as well as the types of dangers and risks that they're exposed to, both anthropogenic and environmental risks. So we cataloged water piping and flood mitigation measures including landslide risks and things of that nature. The participatory mapping was a follow-up step to this transect walk, where the residents that you can see in these photos applied color-coded stickers to a satellite image of their neighborhood to highlight and map and geolocate the risks and things that we had assessed on the previous walk. We did these 3 workshops over the course of several days, so they were all on a separate day. And this is a very interactive activity with a community held in their community center there. The oral history, or the chronology of the community, was a workshop we conducted with them where we gathered the leaders of their local neighborhood association called La Junta. They were elected members from the community. I think there were 18 of them, 3 of them men, 15 of them women. And we basically just asked them about their experiences in the neighborhood, when they moved there, the types of tenure they held. So were they renting, were they living, or were they owning their own homes, the types of homes they lived in, and also the events that had transpired while they had lived there. So any disasters like fires, floods, rain events, and also if they had been like victim to crime or anything of that nature. We documented this on a timeline, and then to highlight again the transtemporal experience of them living in this neighborhood. So here are our deliverables that will be that are forthcoming. So we have one report that Renee discussed with the Law and Climate Change Toolkit from the UN. This is just a list of all the laws and how they apply to the national framework and locally. There's a second report, which is a write-up or a summary of the conclusions of our workshops that we did in the settlement itself. And then we'll also be putting forth a video that summarizes both of those 2 things together. These reports will also be coming out in English and Spanish, and we'll also be presenting to our stakeholders on site. Eventually, we'll also be using some of our leftover funds to improve a public space in one of the settlements that we visited. This one was a legalized one that had already been formalized. Luz de Salvación II, where we spend most of the time doing the workshops, was still in the process of legalization. So they were still missing some certain key infrastructure and utility aspects that the city had not legally been able to provide them. But we will be working to improve a playground in a settlement that has gone through the legalization process and has been formalized, and it has received municipal gas, electricity, water supply, roads, and things of that nature. Additionally, the homeowners there have been advised on how they can potentially improve the security of their homes, since all the homes are self-built by the residents, to bring them more up to standards. So our key points and takeaways are that an interdisciplinary approach is really important. The city of Bucaramanga's process of legalizing settlements involves a very interdisciplinary team involving engineers, sociologists, lawyers, geologists, and they work very much with the community to meet the community's needs in the legalization process. They don't impose very much. It's very much a dialogical approach. These processes are very inclusive, which is what makes them so successful. And the legalization team also spends a lot of time in the settlement itself. So they build a lot of trust face-to-face with the community, even though, as the director of the legalization team himself said, that they are that's not without risk to physical risk to the city officials itself. And these kinds of programs can really lead the way that informal settlements are adapted and legalized around the world using these very dialogical approaches. And lastly, we want to just thank the Dow Company, obviously, as well as the University of Michigan, the Alcaldía de Bucaramanga, the Mayor's Office, as well as the United Nations Andean Countries Hub, and the International Policy Center at the Ford School.
Thank you for sharing your findings. I found this presentation really interesting, and I especially loved the participatory kind of community engagement work, so congrats for that. One thing I'm curious about is, and just for some context, I've done some work in informal settlements and some government projects in Argentina. And we faced a lot of resistance, or we saw a lot of resistance in the community with just kind of the government in general. So it seems like you were able to engage the community quite successfully and enthusiastically on the topics of climate change adaptation, but I'm just curious if your team did encounter any resistance and how you might have faced those challenges.
Yeah, I think one of our key benefits that we had was that we worked directly with the mayor's office, and they had already started the process of legalization. So the community members were already working with the municipality to start integrating that community and that settlement into kind of more a formal neighborhood. So I think we had that positive benefit of not starting from scratch, but from kind of seeing a process at a different stage. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I can ask it. Yeah, so because that relationship already existed with the community and the mayor's office, that really helped. And also Ana Paula, who I forgot to mention on our first slide, she's our faculty advisor. So sorry I did that. But she already had experience as well working in those types of communities and doing those types of workshops, and that was super, super helpful.
There was a question over here. In the back table. Maybe I'm making that up. Maybe first.
I was just curious about, well, thank you for the presentation. This was really great. I was just curious about the partnership you all had with the Solid Waste Division or the Solid Waste Department.
So the Department of, so this is basically the trash collection department. That park that Renee mentioned, Parque Carrasco, is a former landfill, and so they capped that and turned that into a community resource. Bucaramanga lies on this plateau with these really steep canyons, and they'd basically just been dumping trash over the edge, so they fortified it to prevent it from eroding and built that up. And they also have a recycling cooperative where residents of the city collect recycling and own the way it gets processed collectively. And so that was a key part of that.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I thought it was really, really good. Just wanted to ask a little bit about the informal settlements that you visited. So you said you went to 2 of them. Could you describe a little bit about like some of the similarities and differences between the 2 places that you went, and what were some notable takeaways?
We actually went to 3 informal settlements. Yeah. And it was really interesting because we went to one that had already been legalized, one that was in the process of legalization, and one that could not be legalized. So part of Colombia's national law is that if a settlement is in an environmentally protected area, where or more environmentally hazardous area, like if they're prone to flooding, like near a river, then you cannot formalize the settlement because it's a liability for the country and they can't put government resources into it. So they don't want people living in those areas. So we went to one of those, which was on the banks of the Rio de Oro, and we were led by Goal, which is a nonprofit organization who was working in the settlement to help with hazard mitigation. Similar to Luz de Salvacion, since it's not legalized, they don't have paved streets. They don't have easier access to utilities. And then we did visit one legalized settlement that had paved streets and a great playground that had all the exercise equipment that you see all over the US. And you could just tell they had a microphone system where they could make announcements to the entire community, from their community center, to announce that they had meetings that everyone could come to. And then it really showed us why settlements want to be legalized and why they're part of this process and why they're working with the government, and there's not that adversarial relationship, because they want these resources and they want the access to the utilities that they can't have when they're informal still. Yeah.
Nice. Other questions or comments? Oh, we got one over here.
Thank you. This was so interesting. So I think you're the second team that's mentioned that you're using the rest of your funds to give back to the community. So thank you to the Dow Foundation for allowing us to do that with the funds. I think that's really great. How did you end up picking that project, or where did you decide the funds would go?
So, or are you asking like how we picked Bucaramanga?
Playground.
Oh.
We visited the settlement.
Oh yeah, we visited the settlement. I think we kind of realized that there was like a need, and I think if we have the funds to get back, and I think, and I also like the park. I think because like Bucaramanga places a lot of emphasis on the city, like it's known as the city of parks within Colombia. So I think that added emphasis on that, how that's a very vital part of kind of a sense of what you are as a resident in Bucaramanga. But yeah, the location, the reason why we did is like because we visited that, and we work kind of we work closely with community members.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions?
Hi, yeah, to echo what people have already said, I think this is a really, really interesting presentation. I was wondering if you did any work to look at how transferable some of these things are to other informal settlements, especially as climate change accelerates and maybe rural to urban migration also accelerates and there are more informal settlements.
Lawyer.
So this is based on a national law in Colombia. So all of it is very transferable to other cities in Colombia, especially because like each city through their governance structure has the ability to create the program how they want to of how to formalize settlements. And then along this question in a different way, Dr. Ana Paula Pimentel-Walker is working on a new project of the actual construction and the building materials used in informal settlements. So like while we were there, we saw a lot and heard a lot about how the materials used and climate change issues are like melting the roofs that people are using, and there are like a lot of urban heat issues. So her future work will help address this problem.
Just to add to that, Bucaramanga is not the biggest city in Colombia, and that was one thing that was identified is it's a very average Colombian city. So instead of being Bogota or Medellin, like the lessons could be more transferable across the whole country, and that was something that was identified by our partner organizations of an advantage to working in like not the capital or not the biggest city. Yeah.